We wanted to know which ads performed the best on Amazon. So we ran a $20,000 experiment testing every single campaign and targeting type you can possibly create. In total, we launched 30 campaigns, 9 sponsored product ads, 15 sponsored brand ads, and 6 sponsored display ads. So, which of these performed the best? Well, rather than just telling you that it was the sponsored brand video campaign, we're gonna use these 6 metrics and rank them all from highest to lowest. And yeah, that actually was a bit of a spoiler. That video campaign did amazing. Now, before we go diving into the data, it's important to understand the rules of this experiment. First, we used a 1-to-1 campaign format, meaning only one advertised product per campaign. The only exception to this is store spotlight ads that require 3 unique products. With sponsored product ads, campaigns were separated by targeting type, group, and keyword or product match type. For keyword campaigns, the same 20 keywords were used, and the same ASINs or categories were used in all product targeting campaigns. But for this experiment to actually work, we needed to ensure that our broad and phrase campaigns didn't bid on the same keywords in the exact and auto campaigns. So we made sure to add these as negative keywords. The same goes for category campaigns. We excluded all of our targeted ASINs from those campaigns. On to sponsored brand campaigns. These were separated by their ad format, targeting, and match types. Sponsored display campaigns were also separated by their targeting and match types, with bidding set to optimize for conversions. Next, to conduct a fair experiment, all campaigns were given an equal $20 daily budget. All bids were set to Amazon's suggested bid amount, or if it didn't have one, then $2. Lastly, all bidding strategies were set to up and down. These are the rules of the experiment. Now, let's dive into the data to determine which ads performed the best for us on Amazon. Okay, we have the ad console opened up here and we're inside our case study portfolio. But I'm actually not going to be using this to analyze our data. Instead, I'll be using Downstream by Jungle Scout. Here, we have access to real-time KPIs, so we can create our own highly customizable dashboards to help us better evaluate our performance metrics. Unlike the ad console, we're able to build and attach multiple labels to our campaigns, making it much easier to filter and group all of these 30 campaigns. Trust me, this makes today's video a whole lot easier. As you can see, I've created this dashboard here with a few different tabs that further break down each campaign and targeting type. Let's first start with taking a look at how this case study performed as a whole. But just keep in mind that the genesis of this experiment wasn't to maximize our sales or profitability. Rather, we were more curious about which types of campaigns performed the best given an equal playing field. The cool thing about Downstream is we can get access to an array of metrics that aren't available on the ad console. For example, we can track our cost per acquisition, AOV, conversion rate, and my favorite ones are here. These are the budget pacing metrics. Essentially, you just enter your budget goals and then you can begin tracking how you're pacing towards that goal. You'll be able to track your average daily spend by looking at the most recent 3 or 7 days. For larger brands or agencies, I personally know that budget pacing is a pretty big deal. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Coming back now, you can see our other performance metrics. But now let's just dive into the campaign types. Let's begin with spend. With the most campaigns, about 15 to be exact, sponsored brands spent the majority of our budget. This was then followed by sponsored products, and then a very small amount went towards sponsored display. Again, keep in mind that all budgets were the same, and all bids were set to Amazon's suggested bid amount, or $2. Moving on to sales, while sponsored brands did spend the most, they had the second highest sales behind sponsored products, although this was pretty close. And again, sponsored display made up a very small percentage of sales. So with more ad spend and fewer ad sales, our sponsored brand ads had the highest ACoS, of course. A similar story happened with conversion rate. We can see that sponsored brands had the lowest conversion and sponsored display actually had the highest. Although take this with a grain of salt, since these display ads didn't really spend that much relative to the other campaigns. Now with click-through rate, this time there's a different outcome. While sponsored brands as a whole didn't do well converting clicks into purchases, they did do the best job at converting impressions into clicks. This is really interesting and something we're going to dive deeper as we make our way through this report. Last up is cost per click. Sponsored brands were the most expensive, which may help make sense as to why they spent the most overall and perhaps why they had the higher ACoS. But while looking at the campaign types here as a whole is important, I wouldn't make any rash assumptions yet. We still need to look under the hood a bit more and see which targeting types performed the best. Let's hop over to this tab here And now we can dive into all 10 targeting types. We have our product targets, keyword targets, auto targets, and the sponsor display audience target. Now, of course, some of these, like the product targets, are in all 3 campaign types. So instead of reviewing them as a whole here, we'll dive into each of the individual campaign types, starting with category. As a refresher, these were the 2 categories we targeted. This was actually the targeting type that spent the most, and as you can see, they really didn't perform that well. In fact, these campaigns had the highest ACoS and very low conversion rates and click-through rates as well. Breaking them down by campaign type, we can clearly see that sponsored product campaigns didn't do that bad, even with the highest cost per click. It was really just these sponsored brands that contributed to most of the inefficiencies. As a whole, I'd say these campaigns are mostly great at just attracting new ASINs that can then be funneled into the ASIN targeting campaigns. So let's go ahead and look at those, which may come as a surprise, but they were our best performing targeting type. Sorting by sales will confirm this, but you can also see that the ACoS, conversion rate, and click-through metrics are all pretty much at the top as well. Analyzing the individual campaign types, for the most part, they all pretty much crushed it, with the exception of sponsor display, which never really got off the ground. But knowing that the cost per click was the lowest here, a simple bid increase would help us get that up to speed. With a little more spend behind it, sponsored brands performed slightly better than sponsored products. It had the most sales and highest conversion rate. Now, let's give props to sponsored products. They were the most profitable with over $1,000 in spend. They also had the highest click-through rate and the lowest cost per click. All in all, this was our best targeting type. If I could only make one recommendation when targeting competitor ASINs, it would be to try to pair these ads with either a coupon or a limited time deal. Take a look at this page here. Which ads stand out the most? If you're seeing what I'm seeing, it's the ones with coupons and deals. They really help draw the eye in, which will help increase your click-through rate and hopefully your conversion rate. Let's now take a look at all the keyword targeting campaigns. We have our phrase, exact, and broad matches in both sponsored product and sponsored brands. As a whole, they really didn't do that bad with the exception of these 2 sponsored brand ads. This first one here targeting phrase match spent the most. It also had the highest ACoS, lowest conversion rate, click-through rate. In other words, this campaign stunk. Now, this broad match one here, although it did have the second highest sales and the lowest cost per click, it also had the second highest spend, ACoS, and the second lowest conversion and click-through rate. But what about the good now? Well, these 2 exact matches actually did pretty well. The sponsored brand ad had the highest sales and lowest ACoS, with a pretty low cost per click. This other one here also did great with a slightly lower ACoS, however, it just wasn't able to spend as much as the sponsored brand ad. But seeing that it did have the highest conversion rate, this campaign did a great job at attracting high quality search traffic. A simple bid increase would probably go a long way here. Sorting by match types, I like to point out that in our case, exact match campaigns outperformed the others. While click-through rates were pretty much consistent across the board, I think it's fair to say that exact match keywords allow you to hone in on what you're bidding on. Whereas broad and phrase match, on the other hand, can sometimes go off track and win irrelevant searches. Where this really becomes apparent is looking at conversion rates. But with that said, take a look at this sponsored product broad match campaign. It really didn't perform that bad at all. And I'm sure it brought in a ton of new keyword phrases that we can now carry over to our more profitable exact campaigns. And this brings up a great point. In my opinion, broad and phrase match campaigns should be looked at as more controlled automatic campaigns, with the primary goal of identifying new keywords. Since your bidding is mostly confined to a predetermined string of keywords, you're way less likely to waste money bidding on irrelevant search terms than you are with auto campaigns, especially compared to loose match. I've personally never had any luck with this targeting type, and as you're now about to see, that luck still hasn't changed. But just real quick, we are putting a ton of work into this new channel and plan on adding more case study content just like this. We're going really fast, but we're still under 1,000 subscribers, so consider buying low and subscribing to the channel maybe. Okay, we're back now. Let's take a look at the 4 automatic targeting types. Like I just alluded to, loose match performed the worst overall. It had the highest spend and essentially the highest ACoS since the compliments group only spent half the amount. It also had the second highest conversion rate and cost per click. Where it did shine, however, was with click-through rate. But as we know with loose match, these clicks are mostly made up of irrelevant searches that weren't as related to our product like the close match group was, which performed the best. With the third most spend, close match converted the highest sales, had the highest ACoS, conversion rate, and even the lowest cost per click. As long as you do a great job filling in your back-end product details and adding in the right keywords to your listing, close match campaigns will typically be the best auto-targeting type. It tends to bid on the most relevant search terms for your product, so what we're seeing here is really no surprise. We would perhaps just want to increase our bids a little bit more to get the most out of this targeting type. Again, as long as your SEO details are accurately filled in, substitute targeting also tends to perform really well. For us, it was the second highest selling group. It had a great ACoS, conversion rate, and just like close match, a low cost per click. However, with substitutes, I wouldn't pay too much attention to the low click-through rate here. That's because when you're on a product detail page, there's usually more ad inventory here than anywhere else on Amazon. So it makes sense that naturally, you're not going to have a strong click-through rate relative to close match and loose match groups that bid on the search results page. Coming back, the last group to address here is compliments. I've personally never been able to spend much on these, but that's probably a factor more related to your specific product and category. For us, it just didn't spend that much either. And when it did, it had the highest cost per click. I'd still recommend testing this group, but if your results are anything like ours, I just either kill the campaign or run it with low bids and budgets. All right, now let's move on to sponsored display targeting types now, which consist of category, ASIN, and audience targeting. For the audience targeting campaigns, we had 3 retargeting campaigns, 1 targeting detail page views, 1 targeting shoppers who bought from our competitors, and 1 targeting our previous customers. This other campaign was targeting each of the available Amazon audiences. So we had shoppers that were in market for training pads, shoppers who were new pet owners, shoppers who were new to the dog supplies category, and shoppers who had interest in pets and animals. Now, unfortunately, even with all these targets, the audience campaigns just didn't want to spend at all. And if I'm being honest, after a few weeks went by with very little spend, I actually cheated a little bit and increased their bids past Amazon's suggested amount. Or if it didn't have one, unlike the other targeting types, instead of $2, I increased it to $4. This will become apparent when you look at the cost per click column, as it was by far the most expensive group. They just didn't want to spend for some reason, but also just keep in mind, this was our experience with these campaigns. I'm not at all suggesting they won't work for you. In fact, I'd love to play around with them more and see if we can get them to spend more like our other campaigns, so maybe that'll be a future video. Now overall, I'd say that the ASIN targeting group performed the best, which seems to be a bit of a recurring story here. They did only spend around $500, but look how high that conversion rate is in comparison to the other 2 groups. Also, check out the click-through rate. It was nearly about 2 times more effective than the category campaign. I think this is the perfect time to shed light on what I believe to be the most glaring takeaway from this entire experiment. Let's go ahead now and look at the top 10 individual campaigns. All right, I have this list here sorted by sales, and I'm gonna be giving you guys a few seconds to see if you notice anything that really stands out. So go ahead and scan this table, and I'll be back in about like 5 or so seconds. All right, did you see it? Did you see that the top 3 campaigns were video campaigns? Or how about the fact that all 5 of our video campaigns made up the top 10? At the top, we got our ASIN targeting campaign. And if you remember, this was our top targeting type. Next, we got our exact and broad match campaigns. And at 6, we got the phrase, and at 8, we got the category campaign. I honestly don't even really need to make any bold assumptions here. The data's doing it all for me. These video campaigns didn't only convert the most sales, they're absolutely crushing it in every other metric. I especially like to see this relationship here between click-through rate and cost per click, which tells me that video is the most undervalued campaign type on Amazon. Remember earlier in this video when we discovered that sponsored brand campaigns had the highest ACoS and lowest conversion rate? Well, if we take a look at each of the ad formats, we can clearly see that video campaigns were in a complete class of their own. The product collection and store spotlight ads were among the worst campaigns in this entire experiment. So no wonder they sucked down the overall performance. I mean, just look at these video metrics. They're amazing. And if you're wondering now what our video actually looks like, here it is. With the exception of a few simple shots filmed on an iPhone, we mainly just repurposed our bullet points as featured benefits, and even took a few images from our listing. So as you can see, not a whole lot went into production here. So it makes me confident that anyone with at least good images could whip up something very similar. But if it wasn't for us having Downstream at our disposal today, I'm not sure we'd be able to come away with as many findings as we did. If you're a brand or agency and you found this video helpful, use the link in the description to set up a free demo with Downstream today. Or if you're just hanging around here on YouTube, watch this next video to see how Downstream can help you hit your campaign targets with less work and in less time. Meaning only which will help increase your click-through rate, keywords here, your way or the highway. I got the, sorry, 1 second.